Because you're different to anyone else, you can't expect the future you're making for yourself will be different, if not remarkable and incredible. Now hold that thought, because for the moment I'd like to invite you to become introspective. Introduce a new inner perspective. Close your eyes and become focused and absorbed in something useful. And I wonder if you can be curious how a cloud or a rock or a bird or a tree can relate, or a shoe or makeup or a car or a house can correlate. Or perhaps you can empathize with people who love horses, or make up stories, or camping under the stars, or singing around a campfire. Or perhaps at the same time you can be curious how a melody or a harmony or a beautiful high note sung with perfect pitch and enchanting timbre and tone can bring tears to your eyes. Or perhaps you like to analyze the number of beats, or solve a puzzle, or play games of strategy that emphasize your logical, mathematical intelligence. Or you may prefer to be curious about the meaning of life and how and why we exist, or how we relate and communicate with others, and how we seem to understand the feelings and motives of other people. And perhaps you can wonder how performing a physical activity, controlling and moving yourself and other things in space and time can be so absorbing and satisfying and natural. Or you may prefer to be curious why you can find it so enjoyable to read or write or tell a story, or be aware of your own thoughts and feelings and the things that motivate you. Or perhaps you can find three-dimensional activities, perhaps pottery, sculpting, or architecture, or flying, or drawing three-dimensional scenes, very relaxing. And if you didn't have a body, I wonder if you'd mind being a free spirit, floating wherever you like, in a euphoric direction, in space or time. And you can hear a voice, or see some pictures, or you can ignore them and think what you like about things that you love doing, and the wonderful way that makes you feel with all your senses focusing inside a world that only you can see. Perhaps a place so beautiful that just a thought or recollection can bring tears of joy. Go into, so into such an enchanting experience. Thoughts floating in and out of your mind. Maybe questions in a queue. Maybe memories. Maybe shades of grey, or healing colours, or textures. Perhaps shades of pink, or deep purple, or amethyst, or orange, floating inside like sparkling lights or balloons. And perhaps some colours can be closer and some more distant in time. And that's okay. And different things can float like ships without sails, free to go wherever they like. Or they can be emotionless, or dissolve like a melting pot of healing coloured solutions, swirling, separating and blending and touching everything in your consciousness. And perhaps you can find yourself floating back to a particular time or place, and memories can fade in and out of your consciousness like coloured solutions and ideas, swirling around in a way that somehow are familiar and can flow smoothly and steadily as remarkable shades of beautiful pink or incredible blue or purple healing colours intermingle and wash your mind, flowing quietly like water over your head when you were a little baby, born effortlessly with limitless potential. As you watch and let it happen calmly and easily. And many beautiful moments can join together. And perhaps you'd like to follow that thought with a moment of quiet thinking whenever you can about the wonderful things that you've already done and about what you'd like to achieve. Now perhaps you have an affirmation that gives you permission to achieve what you want. Perhaps, I can have an easy, calm and comfortable day. Or, I allow each day to deliver wonderful things into my life. Or perhaps you can create another one to suit your particular needs, or perhaps you like one of those for its fundamental truth and the power it gives you to empower yourself when you say it in your sleep each night. And you can find that you can have an easy, calm and comfortable day. And you can allow each day to deliver wonderful things into your life. And you can say your affirmations and trust your body as you reflect on your wonderful life and about what you'd like to achieve. And now, I'd like to invite you to go through a familiar list to be scrutinized, reducing experiences into a list of trance-inducing experiences to be utilized right now as a vehicle to transport you through a positive change in your life. Perhaps you can decide to truly respect yourself or your body or your entire being and demonstrate that by your actions. And as you continue to think about that, it may be useful to know that there are things that most people experience as repugnant, like the smell or the taste of the fumes of burning toxic substances, even through masks or filters, that must be avoided to avoid the risk of a disastrous consequence. And if you went through that, and somehow your sense of smell or taste changed, you may be curious if you can get some sense of whether the true smell or taste is actually still repugnant, or perhaps if your body is actually telling you the truth when you feel that sense of extreme nausea for the very first time. Or perhaps the reaction is like sucking a lemon, and you may be curious if the fire damage is repaired after every abusive incident you somehow allowed your body to be subjected to. If that's how it will taste every time in the future. Intolerable, like a feeling of extreme nausea, or like sucking a lemon, or perhaps like biting into a red-hot chili pepper that you may have picked off a tree or accidentally picked up as a little child. And your mouth can feel like it's on fire, and you can spit it out, cough and splutter and say, "No way." And you can vow to never, ever do that again. And perhaps you can wonder if professional wine tasters spit out each mouthful to retain their sense of taste, or just their sense. And And perhaps you can go back for inspiration and delve more deeply into your familiar list of trance-inducing experiences, like lying on the grass, looking at the clouds, or being absorbed in a wonderful conversation, or an enchanting activity, or driving a car, or eating popcorn at the movies, or dancing or chanting to an entrancing rhythm. And time can fly, and you can be reminded how a fun new hobby or activity can create a new and interesting internal sensation that can change what you want to do. Or perhaps your heart can skip a beat when the telephone rings. Or you can take a deep breath and feel yourself calming down as you watch the second hand. Or go into a deep trance as you hear your teacher count to 3. And my voice can be that of your teacher. Or you can count for yourself. And you can feel like a little kid again, thinking about something more interesting as you look out of the window in a boring class. Or raise your hand to answer a question and forget to take it down. And perhaps blush when the other kids laugh. Or when someone you like tells you they love your smile or your eyes. It can be quite a disarming experience. It can be very empowering. And you can feel like you have a hand in the control of your experience. Now it's possible you've asked yourself a question similar to, why not stop suffering from smoke inhalation when no one has a smoking gun at your head? Or you can pay attention to your smoke alarm and drive your car to safety. Or perhaps you can be enchanted by the wonderfully even pace of a long trip in a horseless carriage. Or you can enjoy the fresh air and the power of a non-combustible engine with 2 or maybe 4 soothing, even, sure-footed steps drawing you forward, as you may have in a relaxing bygone era before cars were invented. Or you can take your paints and easel and be reminded that life is one long ride in whatever vehicle you choose. And you can be in the driver's seat with your hand on the controls, controlling your emotions and where you're going. And in this situation, your body can control and release or restrict the release of endorphins or serotonin or adrenaline, and change your blood pressure or heart rate or muscle tone, or level of arousal, or relaxation, or concentration to create a physiological response and control your moods and find a perfect balance exactly suiting your needs for the time and place you find yourself in, or the time and place where you are going, and not where you have been in the past. Unless, of course, that time and place in the past is useful to you. And perhaps you can balance perfectly riding a bicycle in a psych ward where the most neurotic people are possibly in charge. And perhaps you can ask someone who thinks he's Jesus Christ if he's good at carpentry, because you have some chairs that need mending in the workshop. And if your own body thinks it's having a midlife crisis, that's not something to crucify yourself over. Perhaps finding the middle of something with an unknown length is not as easy as it looks. And some people rely on a crutch and fall back on it like a sword. And perhaps if you can fall back on any crutch you choose, I wonder what you'd swap your old crutch for. And perhaps you can swap your bicycle for a single-speed electric car or some corridor commuting, and see how far you can go, powered only on a long-life lithium battery. If you've ever played dodgem cars, that could quite possibly lighten the mood in a geriatric ward. And the emotional roller coaster of life could possibly come in quite handy later on, when life occasionally seems a bit monotonous. And when you were a little baby, perhaps you were calmed down and soothed by the beautiful monotonous rhythm of a car trip. And possibly when you were a little older, growing up, you looked forward to going to the fair and going on the rides. And as you got a little older, you enjoyed the beautiful monotonous rhythm of a car trip once again, with your hand back on the controls. And every day is different, and you deserve to enjoy every day of your life. And sometimes a change in life can be depressing. That's a normal reaction to a normal situation in the cycle of life that can seem abnormal. And you can normalize your reaction. And there's no reason why you can't stop being depressed about being depressed, or stop being anxious about being anxious. And perhaps this can somehow lessen depressing thoughts permanently to how it was before, in a natural way, like a back massage. You can feel wonderfully relaxed, on an even keel again, and controlling your emotions is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Or driving a car, or walking along one foot in front of the other, or perhaps doing anything you want, or thinking about, or being absorbed in something useful. And perhaps useful, logical thinking can interrupt non-useful, emotional thinking, or useful, emotional thinking can interrupt illogical thinking. One psychologist once used this idea on an infuriated client who was about to hit him by saying, "Which hand will you hit me with first, the right or left?" The client had to calm down to stop and think about that, and of course didn't hit him at all. And a similar idea is to say, stop and count your blessings and see what you think after that. Or perhaps you'd like to have a ride on an empowering merry-go-round where you can notice and be inspired by your own improvements and abilities, and then you can expect more improvement, which you can notice and be inspired by as you give yourself credit, and then set yourself an expectation of further improvement, which you can notice can inspire more improvement, which is what you expected. And something happened a while ago that triggered an emotional reaction. That's something in your history. And of course, real history is a collection of facts. And your emotional reaction is how you saw and experienced those facts at that time. And this time is different from that time. Perhaps you're a little older and a little wiser, and you can see and re-experience the facts as you recall them and revivify them differently, remembering what's useful, forgetting what's not, unless it becomes useful, in a way that can be enjoyable, and experience an emotional reaction that can actually be very useful. And each little setback in life can be another step that makes you stronger, teaching you to respect your body, accept your body, be grateful for your body, and do everything in your power to protect your body. Resist unnatural temptations, appreciating nothing but the purest and sweetest sights, sounds, and stimulations to your senses that nature can provide, so that your body can give you a steady and constant and sustainable stream of joy, with a natural rhythm of temporary highs and lows, like a boat on a beautiful natural river where you are the captain with your hand on the controls of your experience.